All right, hey everybody. Today we're going to talk about oil and Carter. And so we're getting on into the mid 70s now. Questions are, how did the U.S. support of Israel cost us in oil and still cost us today? Number two, how did the above events with our issues related to supporting Israel lead us into the worst recession since World War II? Number three, Carter's greatest victory as president is going to be at the Camp David Accords. What two nations are there with him that sign a peace deal? And number four, how well did Carter handle the economic issues at home? Now, this lesson, it has a lot of economic impact and business impact. But I think that we're finally getting to lessons that directly impact what is going on in America today. So the others all had an impact, but more of an indirect. So now we're getting to a point where we can definitely see signs of these things. So on October 6th of 73, which is the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur, Syrians and Egyptians are going to launch a surprise attack on Israel to recover land that they had lost in the Six-Day War in 67. Just to show you where I'm talking about, it's teeny tiny, but here along this edge right here is Israel, here is Egypt, here is Syria. So Israel's right here along this, along the Mediterranean right there, and this is Egypt, this is Syria. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Those two, Egypt and Syria, are going to lead this surprise attack to recover this land. All right, President Nixon orders forces on high alert, and he airlifts almost $2 billion in arms to Israel. So ever since I've been around, we have always supported Israel. And a lot of that has to do with, at least starting back to the 40s, our Christian heritage and the idea that these are God's chosen people, and because our founding fathers had somewhat similar beliefs, that we should support Israel, okay, against the Muslims that are in the Middle East. So we support them with basically money, a lot of it. The Israelis won the war, which should not be any shock to you. They've never lost ever. So they won the war, but we're going to pay this huge price for supporting Israel. So on October 17th, the Arab members, which were all these countries around here, all through here, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, Iran, Iraq, okay, all these countries, Egypt, all those countries are going to form OPEC. And I had a teacher ask me a few days ago, what is OPEC? Because she had seen it on the news and wanted a deeper analysis. And I said it's basically a cartel. It is a group of Arab countries who supply most of the world's oil. And they can control everything about our lives by shipping out more oil or limiting the amount that will be shipped. And I'll explain that later. They're going to announce a 5% cut in oil production for those who supported Israel, and additional cuts of 5% every month until Israel gives back that land. So they're not necessarily going after Israel. They're going after Israel's supporters, and that would be us, America. So this was a major blow to our economy because we get most of our oil in the Middle East. You have some people out there that will say, well, we can get oil in Alaska and we can get oil in Texas. But ladies and gentlemen, I think that's somewhere around 5% of the amount of oil we need in a given day. So we're not getting that. That's not enough. Okay, that's like nothing compared to what the Middle East has. And the amount of oil that they have. So on October 19th, we send more aid to Israel, proving that we're not backing down, and Saudi Arabia enacted an oil embargo. They cut off shipments to us and to the Netherlands, which was the second biggest Israeli supporter. So there's a disastrous effect on our American economy. The U.S. is importing 1/3 of its daily consumption and is losing 2 million barrels of oil imports a day. 2 million barrels a day. Long lines start to form at service stations as motorists, they're fearful of running out of gas, are going to keep filling their tanks. This happened not too long ago. Last year, I believe, maybe 2 years ago, when we had a problem in the southeast with gasoline, oil production pipes being shut down, and there was a shortage. And I went to fill up my gas tank, and I had to go to Sanford to do that because all the gas around here was gone, and made it to Sanford. And there was a guy there with like 3 or 4 vehicles of his own that he was going to fill up. So you had people fearful of running out of gas, bring other cars and fill up every car that they have they're fearful of running out. Huge demand, smaller oil supply, oil prices soar. Okay, so when you've got big demand, everybody wants it, but very little supply, the price is going to be jacked up. So OPEC's living large right here, led by the Shah of Iran. They raise crude oil, which is literally what you get out of the ground, and then it has to be processed. The crude oil price is 4-fold. That means times 4. 4. Okay, it's ridiculous how much the price went up. In the U.S., within 2 weeks, gas prices doubled. Home heating fuel rose even more because, from this oil, we get all kinds of things. Home heating fuel, gasoline for our cars, oil. I mean, there's lots of things that derive from crude oil. So you see gas prices went from 35 cents a gallon to 65. Now remember, we're in the 70s, and we would think this is like, we'd take 65 any day, right? But back then, the standard of living was so much lower. I mean, literally, this was like today doubling the price. People couldn't handle it as far as financially. Kissinger, remember Kissinger, negotiates with the Israelis to pull back in the Sinai, which means give back some of that land, and the oil embargo ends in March. But this marks a new era in U.S. history, where we are now dependent upon the Persian Gulf for all of our economic well-being, and they are very willing to use that against us. They saw how we were hurt, with us unable to get to the gasoline tanks and all this. They saw how people were sitting in homes cold because it was all over the news, and they realized, hey, this is a good way we can get to those Americans. It says, we are now faced with the worst recession since World War II. Unemployment rises to 9%. 9%. Okay, so that's a big problem. We're going to have the rise of Carter, but I mentioned the Shah of Iran. I don't have his picture. Okay, I need to just wait a minute. Okay, so Ronald Reagan tries to challenge Ford for the Republican ticket, but is shut out. So it's going to be Ford in the election of 76 versus James Earl Carter, also known as Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter wins a Democratic nomination, and he is the governor of Georgia. He had been a peanut farmer, so he's a regular old Joe kind of guy, ran on the ticket as an outsider against corrupt Washington. Ironically, his slogan sounds a lot like Donald Trump, but they are nothing alike. Carter wins a close election, 287 electoral votes against Ford's 241, by winning most of the South and carrying 97% of the African American vote. He's very informal. He refuses to ride in a limo down Pennsylvania Avenue for his inauguration and still walks down it, which I'm sure set the Secret Service in a total tizzy after, of course, the years prior with JFK's assassination and everything. Here is Jimmy Carter. He is still living, has cancer, went into remission. He works a lot on Habitat for Humanity houses, and you may have seen commercials with him in that. Carter is going to push for human rights around the world and will cut off aid to countries that are not providing that. He negotiates the Panama Canal Treaty because he thinks it is unfair that we have control of the Panama Canal, even though we built it, that should be given back to the Panamanians. So he completes a treaty that says they will get complete control over the canal by the year 2000. Remember, Teddy Roosevelt took that land, kind of semi-started a revolt with Colombia, took that land to build the canal, so I'm sure he was rolling over in his grave when Jimmy Carter gave it back to Panama. Camp David Accords are when the Egyptian President Anwar Sadat boldly visits the Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin in Jerusalem to discuss peace. Now, this means nothing to you all, but I can just tell you this was huge, okay, to have the Egyptian president sit at a table with the Israeli Prime Minister. Never had happened before. I mean, all those Arab countries, as I showed you, all of them hate Israel. So the fact that an Egyptian prime minister was willing to sit at a table with the Israeli leader while everybody else around here hates them was a really big deal, a huge, huge deal. And so they sit and talk, and Jimmy Carter invites them to meet at Camp David, which is the president's retreat in the mountains in Maryland. It is like a semi-Fort Knox or something. I mean, it has all the bells and whistles the president may need, has a situation room, all those things, but it's like his vacation home since he can't really take a private vacation like normal people. And so they're going to meet there at Camp David with Jimmy Carter to sign a deal. As a result, Egypt becomes the first Arab nation ever since like before biblical times, okay, to recognize Israel. So this hate goes back to the Bible, and I won't quote all of that, but basically where you have the rise of an Arab state versus the Jews, the Israelis. So I will show you a picture of Camp David, the Camp David Accords, and this is where they're signing that deal. The Israeli Prime Minister and the Egyptian President with Jimmy Carter, and this was kind of famous with them all, like, you know, doing hands there together. That's that. Okay, then it says in 79, the Shah of Iran is overthrown by an Islamic fundamentalist by the name of Ayatollah Khomeini. He stopped Iran's oil production, shut it down, so that there would be a supply problem, so that they could make more money to create demand. It caused a worldwide oil shortage, a second one. A picture of him is right here. There he is. Okay, he's dead now. Then in November of 79, Iranian militants seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and hold more than 50 Americans as hostages. Jimmy Carter approves this rescue mission, but helicopters break down over the desert and have to abort. Actually, there was a crash with the helicopters, and the hostages are never saved. They are not released until after Carter's presidency, literally the day he goes out of office and Reagan comes in. The Cold War resumes in 79 when USSR invades Afghanistan, and we take a stance against the Soviets. We give weapons to the Afghanis to fight the Soviets, and fast forward to the Afghanistan war we have been in. They use those same weapons we gave them to fight us. So that's interesting. Carter reacts by placing an embargo against the USSR and boycotts the 1980 Olympics in Moscow because the Russians have invaded Afghanistan. Biggest problem on the home front was inflation, and it rises to an unheard of rate. There shouldn't be a minus there of 13%. It was just outrageous. Automobile industry start laying off workers. Standard of living goes to junk. People start to blame Carter. His approval rating goes to 23%. My dad, of course, was working here during that time, and he told me you had to buy toilet paper and paper towels, the teachers did, for the bathrooms because literally the school could not afford to buy it. In the afternoons, they would shut down the school, like when the bell rang for school to be over. All the electricity went off, everything, because literally the school could not afford it. They couldn't afford gas in the buses. It was just a mess. everyone will blame Carter because of all these gas issues with OPEC, not rescuing the hostages, and all that. Go back and do your essential questions.